Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new explainer. I am so excited to share this one with you today because we're exploring some genuinely groundbreaking work presented by Dr. Christophe DeLong, looking specifically at the methodology of Kinexa formation. We're going to see how this method bridges this huge, seemingly impossible gap between two totally different disciplines. Let's just jump right in. So, what does a 19th century post Impressionist painter have in common with the cutting edge biomechanics of human movement? I know, it sounds like the setup to a really nerdy joke, right? But the answer actually unlocks a completely new way of understanding how our bodies move, how we build strength, and really, how we hit peak performance. We're skipping the usual agenda today because this mystery is just way too good to wait on.
Okay, let's dive into this. Chapter 1, The Art of Structure. This is where we anchor modern sports science firmly in the world of classical art.
Back in 1904, the master painter Paul Cézanne wrote this in a letter to Émile Bernard. He said, "Treat nature by the cylinder, the sphere, the cone, everything brought into proper perspective." Now, Cézanne wasn't just talking about a stylistic choice here. He was literally revealing his entire philosophy of observation. He firmly believed that underneath the chaotic, messy complexity of every single natural form, there is a fundamental, hidden geometry.
And you can absolutely see this philosophy on the canvas. In his famous depiction of Montaigne Sainte-Victoire, Cézanne didn't just see a massive, complex pile of rock and dirt. He saw a set of intersecting planes. When he looked at an apple, he saw a deformed sphere. When he painted a human face, he was assembling primary volumes. He broke the visual world down to its absolute basics just so he could rebuild it with real purpose.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, the geometry of gesture. Now, hold on to that idea of deconstruction, because we're going to make a bit of a conceptual pivot here. We are moving from the static world of visual art right into the highly dynamic realm of sports science and biomechanics. And this brilliantly illustrates our core concept. On the left, we've got Cézanne's still life of everyday fruit. On the right, the biomechanical framework of a human being in motion. Visually, yeah, they are worlds apart, but philosophically, they are actually deeply connected. The exact same fundamental truth applies to both. Cézanne was endlessly searching for foundational parameters within static visual form, and Kinexa formation, guided by experts like Dr. Christophe DeLong, is searching for those exact same foundational parameters, but within human gesture. It's the same truth of deconstruction, whether you're holding a paintbrush trying to capture a scene or analyzing an elite athlete trying to perfect a sprint. Chapter 3, Understanding through repetition. So, how do you actually go about finding these hidden parameters? Well, that leads us to a really interesting question. Why would a master painter spend so much of his valuable time obsessively painting the exact same piece of fruit?
I mean, Cézanne painted apples hundreds and hundreds of times. And it wasn't because he lacked imagination, and it wasn't just because he really liked apples. He did it to completely exhaust his understanding of a simple object before he even dared to tackle something more complex. Every single time he painted a new apple, it revealed a tiny, almost invisible nuance of structure or light or volume that he'd missed in the previous one.
And this historical artistic obsession? It actually maps directly onto modern biomechanics. The Kinexa philosophy relies on this exact same principle. You choose a fundamental gesture, and you exhaust it. You analyze it under all conditions, at all intensities, across all physical states. You don't just glance at a movement once. You break it down over and over until it gives up all of its hidden secrets. Moving on to Chapter 4, the 5 fundamental variables. So if Cézanne had his cylinders, his spheres, and his cones, what are the equivalents when we're talking about human movement? Let's take a look at the specific scientific metrics that Kinexa formation relies on to map the human body.
Now, what's really fascinating about this breakdown is how perfectly the art translates over to the science. Just as Cézanne reduced form to basic geometry, Kinexa reduces all human movement to 5 fundamental variables. So, the form becomes the joint angle, the resistance becomes the moment of force, the dynamics of the movement translates to angular velocity, the timing is the activation delay in the muscles, and finally, balance is analyzed as physical symmetry. These right here are the literal building blocks of every single step you take.
But here is where modern science takes a massive leap forward. While Cézanne had to rely entirely on his naked eye, staring for hours and days on end, Kinexa technology measures all 5 of these parameters simultaneously, in real time, on every single repetition an athlete performs.
It is instantly capturing the invisible data of athletic performance. It's pretty wild when you think about it. Let's apply this to a movement we all know, the simple squat. To the untrained eye, a squat seems incredibly basic, right? You bend your knees, you go down, you stand back up. But let's take a closer look at the hidden geometry beneath the surface of that movement. When Conexa deconstructs this, here's what they're actually looking at. Step 1, they're tracking the exact hip flexion angle at every single micropoint of the descent. Step 2, they're measuring the pelvis rotation speed in just the first 50 milliseconds of the movement. Step 3, they identify the microscopic delay and muscle activation, specifically between your inner thigh muscle, the vastus medialis, and your outer thigh muscle, the vastus lateralis. And finally, Step 4, checking the load symmetry between the left and right limbs. These precise data points, these are the invisible cylinders, spheres, and cones of the human squat. Chapter 5, Architecture Before Performance. And this brings us to our final unifying concept, the overarching lesson that ties Dr. DeLong's biomechanics right back to our post-impressionist painter. Think about an architect carefully drafting a structural foundation. Before a building can soar into the sky, covered in glass and steel, its geometric foundation has to be plotted out perfectly. Cezanne operated the exact same way. He had to construct the geometric architecture of his composition way before he even thought about applying beautiful colors or worrying about the final visual performance of the piece. And here is the core takeaway of this entire explainer. In art logic, geometric composition comes first, visual performance comes second. In sports logic, as defined by Conexa, neuromotor architecture must come first, athletic performance comes next. You simply cannot build a high-performing athlete, or honestly, even just a healthy, functional body, if the underlying fundamental variables, those hidden geometric parameters, are flawed. Just like a masterpiece on a canvas, your physical capability requires an invisible, perfectly constructed foundation. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap things up today. Next time you're moving around, whether you're hitting the gym or honestly just walking up a flight of stairs, ask yourself, what is the fundamental architecture hiding beneath your own daily movements? Are your invisible cylinders and spheres properly lined, or is there a structural flaw just waiting to be uncovered? It really changes how you look at the human body, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the mechanics of the world around you.